It was late autumn when I took on the run that changed everything. I was hauling a flatbed full of construction steel from St. Louis to Amarillo, a job I'd done a dozen times before. The company paid extra for overnight runs, fewer cars on the road, less traffic, and I needed the money bad. My wife had left me 2 months earlier, the mortgage was late, and I was living more in my truck than at any apartment. I wasn't worried about the miles or the hours. I'd been on the road since I was 21. Nothing scared me out there until that night. I hit I-44 around 10:30 p.m., the sun long gone, the fields around me stretching into darkness. My Peterbilt rumbled steadily, the dashboard glowing soft green. My thermos of coffee sat in the holder, untouched. Something about the night already felt off. Too still, too empty, even for Oklahoma backroads. By midnight, the highway was deserted. No taillights ahead, no headlights in my mirrors. Just my rig and the road. I stopped at a truck pull-off just before the Texas line, a gravel lot with a single flickering sodium lamp and a row of overflowing dumpsters. There was no building, no bathrooms, just a place to park and rest. The kind of stop you only use if you're desperate or too tired to keep going. I climbed down from the cab to stretch my legs, the gravel crunching under my boots, my breath fogging in the cold air. That's when I heard it. It started faint, like a whisper or maybe fabric dragging along metal. I thought it was the tarp over my load flapping in the breeze. I turned to check the straps. Everything was tight. No wind. The air was still as a graveyard. Then came a sound that cut straight through me, a slow, deliberate scrape across the side of the trailer, like someone dragging a fingernail from one end to the other. I spun, shining my flashlight along the trailer. Nothing, just steel beams lashed tight with ratchet straps. My heart thumped in my ears. I swung the beam around the lot, empty. No cars, no other trucks, no sign of life. Only the sodium lamp buzzing above, casting long shadows across the gravel. I told myself it was an animal. Maybe a coyote or raccoon. But when I climbed back into the cab and shut the door, I caught movement in the corner of my eye, something ducking behind the dumpsters. A figure, tall and thin, its outline wrong somehow, like its limbs were too long. I grabbed the CB, keyed up the mic. Anybody parked out near mile marker 162? My voice cracked. Got someone creeping around out here. Static. No answer. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like any trucker I'd ever heard, thin, whispery, like it came from underwater, the CB crackled. You shouldn't have stopped. My hands went cold. Who is this? I demanded. Silence. I fired up the engine, adrenaline surging. As the diesel roared to life, I flicked my lights across the lot. The figure stood now in the open between me and the dumpsters. Pale. Gaunt. Its clothes hung in tatters, flapping in a wind that wasn't there. Its eyes reflected the headlights like an animal's, but they were black, bottomless. It didn't move, just stared. I slammed the truck into gear and tore out of the lot, gravel spitting from my tires. In the mirror, the figure didn't shrink the way it should have. For a moment, it looked like it was running after me. No, gliding, keeping pace with the trailer. My stomach lurched. I floored it. The speedometer climbed past 70, 80. When I dared glance again, it was gone. My hands shook on the wheel as I merged back onto the interstate. I told myself it was a trick of the light, exhaustion, a drifter high on something. But then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hit speaker, too scared to put it to my ear. You left the door unlocked. A voice hissed. I swerved, heart slamming into my ribs. The passenger door handle rattled violently like someone was trying to get in. The locks clicked up on their own. I slammed them back down. Get the hell out of my truck! I shouted. Silence. I drove for 2 straight hours without stopping, eyes glued to the road, every nerve screaming. By the time I reached Amarillo, dawn was breaking. I parked at the delivery yard and practically jumped out of the cab, shaking. I didn't even do my post-trip inspection. I just wanted to be off the road. The yard foreman came out, eyeing me. You okay, Jake? You look like hell. I nodded, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. Long night, I muttered. He frowned and walked around the trailer. Then he called me over. The hell happened here? I followed, stomach turning. Across the entire side of my trailer, 40 feet of metal, were long, deep gouges, like claws or nails dragging through the steel. Not scrapes from branches or road debris. Not anything natural. 5 parallel lines, perfectly spaced, running from front to back. The foreman stared at me like I had answers. I didn't. I couldn't even speak. For weeks after that, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every rest stop, every pull-off, every empty stretch of highway felt like it was waiting for me. The calls kept coming, different numbers each time, always the same voice whispering things it shouldn't know. I'm in the back. Check your mirror. You shouldn't have stopped. Sometimes, in the reflection of my side mirror, I'd catch a glimpse of something pale riding just behind the trailer. Sometimes at night I'd hear the scrape again, the long, slow drag of nails on steel, even when I was driving 70 miles an hour. I quit long-haul trucking 2 months later. Took a job delivering propane locally. I don't drive past that mile marker anymore. I don't answer unknown calls, but some nights, parked in my driveway, I hear it. Faint, deliberate, scraping along the side of my propane truck. I don't know what followed me out of that gravel lot. I don't know what it wants. All I know is it's still out there, waiting for another trucker to stop alone in the middle of the night. Story the end. The night air over Highway 287 in northern Texas felt like a furnace, even though the sun had been down for hours. Heat waves still shimmered off the blacktop as my rig's headlights cut through the dark. I'd been driving long enough to know this stretch well. Flat land, a few scattered gas stations, and miles of empty road. But even with 20 years behind the wheel, this run felt different. My dispatcher had called me last minute to pick up a load of industrial equipment bound for Amarillo. It was a good paycheck, but something about it made me uneasy from the start. It was just after 1 a.m. when I saw the first sign of trouble. In my side mirror, about 100 yards back, a pair of headlights appeared. Nothing strange there. Plenty of vehicles shared these roads. But these lights didn't behave like a normal car or truck. They stayed the same distance behind me, no matter how fast I went or how slow I took the curves. I tapped the brakes, thinking maybe it was a state trooper pacing me, but no flashers came on. The vehicle stayed there, a silent predator in my blind spot. I pulled into a rest area about 20 miles outside of Wichita Falls. It wasn't much, just a cracked asphalt lot with a single bathroom and a few picnic tables. The lights behind me didn't follow in. When I killed my engine, the night went dead silent, the kind of silence you only get in remote places, where even the insects seem to hold their breath. I stepped out to stretch my legs, sweat sticking my shirt to my back. The air smelled faintly of creosote and something else, something metallic, like blood on rusted iron. I lit a cigarette and walked to the edge of the lot. In the distance, under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, I saw someone standing there. At first, I thought it was another driver, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized it wasn't right. The figure was too still, too rigid. It looked like a man in a long coat, head tilted slightly as though listening. The hairs on my arm stood up. I flicked the cigarette into the dirt and back toward my truck. When I opened the cab door and turned to glance back, the figure was gone. I climbed in and locked the doors. My heart was thudding against my ribs back, but I told myself it was just fatigue, that I'd been on the road too long. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and the world felt normal again. But as I pulled out of the rest area, the headlights were back in my mirror, exactly the same distance behind me as before. My stomach clenched. Whoever it was hadn't pulled into the lot with me, but they'd waited, watching. For the next 50 miles, the lights followed. Not once did they pass, fall back, or pull alongside, just that same relentless distance. I tried to call dispatch, but my cell had no signal out here. I fiddled with the CB radio, but all I got was static. At one point, I thought I heard a voice through the static, low, whispering, saying my name. I snapped the radio off, knuckles white on the wheel. Eventually, I reached a truck stop near Vernon. It was a big one, with rows of rigs parked and engines idling. The glow of sodium lights and the smell of diesel made me feel safer, like stepping into civilization after a long exile. I parked at the far end, away from the main entrance. The headlights that had been following me didn't turn in. I scanned the highway, but saw nothing. Just empty road stretching into darkness. Inside the diner, the air conditioning hit me like a slap. I ordered a coffee and sat at the counter. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, asked if I was okay. I must have looked rattled. I told her about the headlights, trying to sound casual, but she froze for a second, her expression tightening just enough for me to notice. She poured my coffee without saying a word and walked away. After a while, I felt foolish. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Some other driver on the same route. I ate a plate of eggs, paid my bill, and went back to my rig. The lot was quieter now. Most of the truckers were asleep in their cabs. As I unlocked my door, I heard something. A faint sound like fingernails scraping metal. I froze, the key halfway in the lock. The sound came again from the back of my trailer. I swung around, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the darkness, catching nothing but my own trailer door. The noise stopped. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack a rib. I told myself it was just the metal contracting in the cool night air. That was when I noticed the footprints. Wet, dark footprints leading from the edge of the lot straight to my trailer, then stopping abruptly. They weren't boot prints, they were bare feet. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors. My hands trembled as I started the engine. I needed to get back on the road, get this load delivered, and I pulled out. As I pulled out, my headlights caught a shape standing just beyond the truck stop's fence, a tall, thin silhouette with its head cocked at that same unnatural angle. My stomach dropped. I floored the gas. For hours, nothing happened. No headlights behind me, no figures on the roadside. I started to think it was over, that my mind had been playing tricks on me. But around 4 a.m., just outside Amarillo, I glanced at my side mirror and nearly swerved off the road. Something was clinging to the side of my trailer. A man, or what looked like a man, sprawled against the metal like a spider, fingers hooked into the frame. His face was pale and expressionless, eyes black pits. His mouth moved as if speaking, but I heard nothing. I slammed the brakes. The rig shuddered, tires screaming against the asphalt. Whatever it was let go, tumbling into the darkness behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. I didn't stop to check. I just kept driving, eyes darting to the mirrors every few seconds. Nothing there now but the empty road. When I finally reached the drop yard in Amarillo, dawn was breaking. The sky was streaked with orange and purple, and the world felt almost normal again. I backed the trailer into the dock and climbed down to unhook. That's when I saw it. Scratches, deep parallel gouges running the entire length of my trailer, like something had clawed at the metal. My stomach lurched. I looked around the yard, but no one else was there yet. Just me, the trailer, and those impossible marks. I turned in the paperwork and got back in my cab, desperate to put miles between me and whatever had happened that night. As I pulled out of the yard, my cell phone finally got a signal. I called dispatch to let them know the load was delivered. My dispatcher asked if I was okay, said my voice sounded off. I hesitated, then told him the truth. About the headlights, the figure, the thing on my trailer. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Yeah, you're not the first driver to say something like that on that route. It's been happening for years." I asked what he meant, but he just muttered something about people disappearing and hung up. Now, every time I run at night, I catch myself scanning the mirrors, looking for headlights that won't go away or shapes that shouldn't be there. I tell myself it was exhaustion, heat, stress, but deep down, I know better. Out there, on those endless Texas highways, something rides the dark, something that watches truckers waiting for the right moment to climb aboard, and I know someday, if I'm not careful, it might decide to ride with me again. Story the end. It was late October when Randy decided to take the long haul from Phoenix to Dallas. The roads were mostly empty at night, and the desert stretched endlessly on either side of the highway. Randy had been trucking for over 15 years, and he'd seen his share of weirdness. Stray animals, abandoned rigs, even some lone drifters on the roadside. But nothing prepared him for what happened that night. He left Phoenix around 10 p.m., the city lights fading behind him as he climbed into the mountains. The cab of his 18-wheeler smelled faintly of old coffee and the lingering scent of cigarettes. He tried to stay alert with a strong black coffee and the low hum of classic rock on the radio. The highway was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against your ears and made every creak of the truck sound like an alarm. About 2 hours into the drive, near a particularly isolated stretch of highway north of Tucson, Randy saw it. At first, it looked like a hitchhiker, a man standing by the side of the road, thumb extended. But as he got closer, Randy realized something was off. The man was too still, almost stiff, and his clothes were soaked through, though the night was dry and cool. His face was pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the headlights. Randy slowed instinctively, gripping the wheel tight. The man didn't move, didn't react, just stood there, watching. Randy shook his head and muttered, "Screw it," and gunned the engine to pass, hugging the shoulder to give him space. But when he glanced in the side mirror, the figure had moved, closer to the edge of the asphalt, almost stepping forward, though Randy hadn't slowed enough to give him room. The hair on the back of Randy's neck prickled. He told himself to focus on the road, that he was tired and imagining things. Still, unease settled deep in his chest. Around 1 a.m., he pulled into a rest area near a dry riverbed, hoping to stretch and wake up before continuing. The lot was empty, silent, except for the low groan of the wind. As he walked toward the vending machines, Randy caught sight of a truck parked at the far end of the lot. It was an old rig, older than anything he'd seen in years, with rusted sides and blackened windows. Oddly, the truck was facing the wrong way, angled slightly, as if it had driven in backwards. Randy froze. Something about it didn't feel right. He walked back to his cab, trying to shake off the feeling, but as he glanced at his mirrors, he saw movement. The blacked-out truck was no longer parked. It was following him slowly, keeping pace as he pulled back onto the highway. Randy slammed the pedal down, but the truck mirrored him perfectly. Its engine didn't roar. It was silent, gliding alongside him like a predator stalking prey. Panic set in. Randy reached for the CB, calling out for any truckers in the area, but the radio was dead, static, broken fragments of words, then silence. He glanced at the darkened windows of the truck beside him. For a brief instant, he thought he saw a face, pressed flat against the glass, smiling in a way that made his stomach twist. He jerked his eyes away, focusing on the road ahead. The night dragged on. Randy drove as fast as he dared, weaving through the desert, but the truck stayed beside him. Tire marks appeared on the shoulder, wide and deep, as though the truck were stepping alongside him. Occasionally, he thought he heard scratching noises, soft at first, then louder, metal on metal, like fingernails scraping along the side of a trailer. By the time he reached New Mexico, exhaustion had taken over. Randy's hands ached from gripping the wheel, his eyelids heavy. He stopped at a small diner just off the highway, shaking as he recounted the story to the cook, an older man with a lined face. The man's eyes went wide when Randy described the truck. "You saw it," he whispered. "You really saw it." Randy blinked. "Saw what?" "That rig. Black windows. Moves like it shouldn't. People see it out there sometimes, mostly at night. They try to drive past it, and it follows. Some folks never make it." Randy swallowed hard, trying to laugh. That's just an old truck, man. Rusted. Probably some kid messing with headlights or something." The cook shook his head. "No, this is different. That thing, it's not alive. Not like us. And it doesn't want to be seen. If it notices you, well, let's just say it doesn't like people driving at night alone." Randy left the diner, shaken, but forced himself back on the road. He stuck to the center lane, eyes darting to the mirrors every few seconds. Hours passed, and he caught glimpses of shadows, of headlights where there shouldn't have been any, of the blacked-out cab sliding alongside him on lonely stretches. Every time he thought he had lost it, there it was again, perfectly in step with him, always silent, always watching. Once, near a stretch of highway outside Albuquerque, Randy pulled off to the shoulder to check a noise in the engine. He stepped down from the cab and froze. The blacked-out truck was there, parked inches from his rig, though it hadn't been there a second before. The air was cold, unnaturally so, and the shadows around the truck seemed to stretch like smoke. He could feel a presence, something patient, waiting. He ran back to his truck, heart hammering, threw himself into the driver's seat, and floored it. The highway blurred as he drove, headlights cutting through the night. He didn't dare look in the mirrors for fear of seeing the face again. But the feeling of being followed never left. At every rest stop, he double-checked his rig, walking around it with a flashlight, but nothing ever appeared. Still, he could feel it, watching, silent, patient. The calls started on the CB the next week. Whispers, static-filled, barely audible, repeating his name in low, elongated tones. Sometimes, late at night, Randy could see fresh tire marks on the shoulder outside his parked truck, though no one had been there. And every so often, when he glanced at the mirrors, he thought he saw the blacked-out cab slipping silently behind him, waiting for him to fall asleep at the wheel, waiting for night to reclaim him. Eventually, Randy quit running night routes altogether. He refused to drive after dark, but the memory never left. The soundless truck, the hollow face in the window, the way it mirrored his every movement. And he knew that somewhere out there, on those long, empty highways, it was still waiting. Patient. Silent. Endless, and one day it would find him again. Story the end. The first time it happened, I was heading west on I-80 through Nebraska, the kind of stretch where the plains roll flat and black under a sky so wide it feels like it could swallow you. It was 2 a.m. My load was a double trailer full of electronics bound for Sacramento. The radio was low, some late-night call-in show, the host mumbling about trucker folklore and haunted highways. I laughed it off at first. I'd been driving rigs for almost 20 years and thought I'd seen everything. Drunk drivers, tornadoes, even a freak snowstorm in Texas. But that night, I learned there are some things on the road that don't make sense, no matter how hard you try. I had been running on caffeine and sunflower seeds, chewing the shells like gravel, trying to stay awake. No other trucks or cars were on that stretch of highway, just me and the darkness. The white dashed lines blurred together until they became one long, unbroken thread. And then, without warning, I saw taillights ahead. Dim, flickering, like candles in the wind. I slowed down and squinted. The taillights didn't look right, too far apart, too dim. As I closed the distance, I saw it was an old Kenworth cab-over, the kind you don't see much anymore. Its paint was scorched like it had been through a fire. The trailer behind it was an old livestock hauler, the kind with slatted sides. Through the gaps, I could swear I saw movement, shapes shifting like animals, but too still and too wrong. The Kenworth was going maybe 40, weaving a little. I flashed my brights and tapped my air horn, a courtesy call to say, move over or speed up. It didn't react. The CB was dead silent. I switched channels, tried hailing the driver. Breaker 19, you all right up there? Nothing. Just static. Then the smell hit me. It came through my vents like a slap, rotting meat mixed with diesel and something coppery, like blood. I gagged, turned off the vents, but it was still in the air. The livestock trailer's slats let me see more now. The shapes inside weren't animals. They were people, or things shaped like people, pressed against the wood, faces pale, mouths open in silent screams, eyes black pits. Their fingers clawed at the gaps, nails cracked and bloody. My skin went cold. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. What the hell? I whispered to nobody. The Kenworth veered slightly onto the shoulder, then back into the lane. Its right taillight blinked, then went out. I decided to pass it. As I eased into the left lane, I got a clear look at the cab. The driver was there, or at least something was. Its head was bent forward, face obscured by a dark hood or shadow. Its hands on the wheel were pale and long, fingers like white roots wrapped around the rim, and it was humming. I could hear it over my engine, low and rhythmic, a sound that vibrated through my chest like a second heartbeat. As I pulled alongside, it turned its head, slowly, deliberately. I swear on my life there was no face under that hood, just a void with a faint glow deep inside, like coals dying in a pit. The humming grew louder, filling the cab of my truck, though my windows were up and my engine roared. Then, through the slats of the trailer, all those pale faces turned toward me at once. Their mouths moved in unison, forming words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. You're next. I floored it, tires screaming, my trailer swaying behind me. The Kenworth didn't speed up or slow down, it just kept humming. When I looked in my mirrors, it was gone. Not receding into the distance, just gone like it had never been there. The highway was empty again, black and endless. I didn't stop until I hit a truck stop outside Cheyenne. My hands were still shaking when I paid for coffee. The guy at the counter, an older driver with a belly like a keg, asked if I was okay. I told him what I'd seen, expecting him to laugh. He didn't. He just nodded, slow and grim. You saw the black hauler, he said. The what? He leaned in. Old Kenworth cab-over, scorched paint, livestock trailer. Folks say it's been on the road since the 70s, ever since a driver named Earl Jansen burned alive in his rig after crashing with a load of cattle, only it wasn't just cattle. Some say he was running something he shouldn't have been. People, maybe. Kids. He died screaming, and now he's still out here running his route. Folks that get too close, they don't last long. I stared at him. You're kidding. He shook his head. Seen it myself once, never told nobody until now. Don't drive at night no more. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my cab, engine off, clutching my thermos like it was holy water. Every set of headlights on the interstate made my heart jump. Around 4 a.m., I drifted off despite myself. I woke to the smell. Rotting meat, copper, diesel. My breath caught in my throat. I opened my eyes. Parked directly across from me in the dim glow of the lot's sodium lamps was the Kenworth. Scorched paint, livestock trailer, no driver visible. The humming started low and steady, vibrating through the steel of my cab. I froze. My radio flicked on by itself, static rising and falling like breath. Then, faint under the static, a voice whispered my name. Not once. Over and over. I fumbled for my keys, turned the engine, slammed it into gear, and peeled out of that lot, tires squealing. When I looked back, the Kenworth was gone. I cut my haul short, called my dispatcher, and told him I was sick. For weeks, I tried to avoid night hauls. But sometimes you don't get a choice. One night on US 50 in Nevada, the loneliest road in America, I saw the taillights again. Dim, flickering, too far apart. My heart dropped into my gut. I didn't slow down. I didn't look. I kept my eyes straight ahead. But in my mirrors, the trailer was there, right behind me now, faces pressed against the slats, mouths moving. The humming was louder, inside my skull, making my vision blur. My steering wheel vibrated under my hands like something alive. I slammed the brakes, veered onto the shoulder, jumped out, and ran into the desert like a madman. The cold air hit me. Sand crunched under my boots. When I turned back, my truck was there, but no Kenworth. Just empty highway. I sat there until dawn, shaking, afraid to get back in my cab. When I did, the seats were damp like something had been sitting there. My logbook was open on the dash. A single line was written in neat black ink that wasn't mine. Your route ends soon. That was 6 months ago. I don't haul at night anymore. I barely haul at all. But sometimes, even on short daytime runs, I'll see it far off on an overpass or at the edge of a field. A scorched Kenworth cabover with a livestock trailer, sitting still, humming faintly. And at night, when the house is quiet, I hear the hum in my dreams. Low, rhythmic, closer each time. Story the end. It was about 11:30 p.m. when I left the Love's truck stop outside Amarillo, Texas. I'd fueled up, grabbed some food, and poured what felt like my 5th coffee of the night. I had to make it through Oklahoma before sunrise to deliver my load. A full trailer of industrial equipment, and I was already behind schedule. The interstate was a black ribbon under my headlights, stretching into nothing, the kind of empty you only see in the middle of nowhere at night. I'd been on the road for nearly 20 years. Nothing surprised me anymore. At least that's what I thought. I'd driven through blizzards, tornado warnings, even a wildfire once. Nights on the interstate are always eerie, but they're a kind of quiet I've come to love. No distractions, no honking, just the low hum of the engine and the sound of my tires eating up the miles. But that night, something was different. It was the kind of quiet that feels alive. About an hour past Amarillo, the fog rolled in, thick, heavy. 1 minute, the air was clear. The next, I was driving through a curtain of gray, so dense my high beams just bounced back at me. It was like driving underwater. I slowed down, gripping the wheel tighter. The CB radio on my dash crackled with static. No chatter from other truckers. Nobody seemed to be out here but me. Then I saw the first sign something was off. A lone car parked on the shoulder, hazards blinking. I slowed, peering through the fog. The car door was open, nobody inside, no driver walking around, nothing but those lights blinking like a heartbeat in the mist. I passed it slowly, a shiver crawling up my spine. When I glanced in the mirror, the car was gone, completely, like it had never been there. I tried to shake it off. Fatigue plays tricks on you. Long hours behind the wheel, caffeine and monotony, it messes with your mind. But about 20 minutes later, I saw something worse. A man standing on the side of the road, thumb out like he was hitchhiking. He wore an old denim jacket, head down. As my truck passed him, he looked up. His face, Jesus. It wasn't right. His eyes were empty sockets, just black holes. I stomped on the accelerator. I've never picked up hitchhikers, not once in my career. But seeing him left me feeling like I'd driven over my own grave. I watched the mirrors for miles afterward. Every time my trailer lights flickered on the wet asphalt, I thought I saw him behind me, walking along the shoulder, matching my speed. The road signs were starting to look wrong, too. Twisted, rusted, faded. One said service area 10 miles. Another said service area 2 miles. But when I got there, nothing, just more highway. It was like the road had swallowed it whole. My GPS started glitching out, showing me roads that didn't exist. It was rerouting me onto what looked like old country lanes, though I was still clearly on the interstate. Then my truck started to feel wrong. The steering got loose, the dashboard flickered, the CB started picking up faint whispers, too faint to make out words, but enough to raise the hairs on my arms. And then came the smell. It started as diesel, but thicker, sweeter, like something rotting. I saw headlights behind me. A big rig, no trailer, moving fast. Its lights were yellowed like old halogens from decades ago. I figured it was another trucker. Relief washed over me. At least I wasn't alone anymore. But when I slowed to let it pass, it stayed behind me. Right on my bumper. No honks, no attempts to pass. Just following. I radioed out. "This is Black Star hauling eastbound on 40. Anyone out here?" Static. Then a faint, drawn-out voice. "You shouldn't have stopped. That's all. Nothing else." I slammed the mic down and pressed the accelerator. The other truck kept up effortlessly. Its headlights weren't just lights. They seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat. I took the next exit without thinking. A small 2-lane road winding into the woods. The truck followed. The fog thickened. Trees closed in. My GPS went black. I pushed the engine hard, but no matter how fast I went, the other truck stayed right behind me. Then its lights flickered and went out completely. I checked the mirrors. Gone. Nothing there. Just me, the fog, and the sound of my own heart pounding. I slowed down, pulling into what looked like an abandoned way station. Old trailers sat rotting in the lot. Graffiti covered the building. The place reeked of damp wood and oil. I cut the engine and sat in silence. That's when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap on my passenger door. My stomach dropped. I turned my head slowly. A face stared back at me through the glass. Hollow eyes. Denim jacket. The hitchhiker. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. I reached for the gear shift, but my hand wouldn't move. It was like my whole body was locked up. He pressed his hand against the window. The glass fogged under his touch. Then I heard it, a low hum, like an engine idling, but deeper, vibrating through my bones. Out of the fog, the old truck appeared. No driver visible. Its engine roaring without headlights, rolling straight toward me. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen. The hum grew louder, like it was inside my head. The hitchhiker's face twisted into something inhuman, features sliding and melting like wax. His hands slipped through the glass, reaching toward me. Then, silence, just like that. No hum, no truck, no hitchhiker. I was sitting in my rig alone, parked on the shoulder of the interstate. The fog had lifted. The sky was clear. My GPS showed the right route again. I drove the rest of the way to Oklahoma without stopping, gripping the wheel so hard my fingers went numb. I didn't use the CB. I didn't look at the mirrors. I just drove. When I finally delivered the load, the receiver said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. It's been months now. I still drive nights, but not through Amarillo. Not through that stretch. Because every once in a while, when the fog gets thick, I swear I see headlights in my mirror. Old yellow headlights. And I hear it, the faintest sound of tapping on my passenger door, just waiting for me to stop. Story the end. The rain had been coming down for hours, turning the highway into a slick ribbon of black glass. My wipers scraped back and forth in a steady rhythm, but they barely kept up with the downpour. I was hauling a load of refrigerated meat from Missouri to New Mexico, a route I'd driven more times than I could count. It was supposed to be a routine trip. Long, monotonous, but nothing unusual. Out here, at 3 a.m, I was used to seeing nothing but my own headlights cutting through the darkness. But that night, the road felt different. There's a stretch of U.S. Route 54 in the Oklahoma Panhandle where civilization seems to vanish. No lights, no houses, just endless plains stretching into the black horizon. I'd been through it before, but this time there was something in the air. An electric tension, like the moments before a thunderstorm, only sharper. Even the CB radio, which usually buzzed with chatter from other truckers, was dead silent. I had my thermos of coffee next to me, the heater humming low, the dash glowing faint green. My rig, a 2018 Freightliner, had always felt like a fortress on wheels, but that night it felt like a coffin. I caught myself glancing at the mirrors more often than usual, scanning the empty road behind me. The rain made it impossible to see far, but now and then, through the sheets of water, I thought I saw headlights flicker in the distance, never steady, just a faint pulse of light that vanished as soon as I focused on it. About 40 miles past the last gas station, I spotted a vehicle on the shoulder. It was an old, boxy sedan, maybe from the 70s, with its trunk open and hazard lights blinking dimly. As I got closer, I slowed down out of instinct. You don't survive long out here by ignoring what's on the road. At first, it looked like someone was bent over near the trunk, rummaging around. But as I drew nearer, the figure straightened up and turned toward me. He, or it, was tall and gaunt with shoulders that seemed too broad for his frame. His clothes were soaked, clinging to his body like a second skin, and his face didn't make sense. The headlights caught it for a fraction of a second, and I saw eyes that were too far apart, a mouth that curved too wide, stretching almost to his ears. He raised one arm, palm open, as though to wave me down. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to keep driving. I gripped the wheel, pressed the accelerator, and didn't look back. 5 miles later, I was still shaking. The rain hammered against the windshield, louder now, as if trying to drown out my thoughts. I told myself it was just a man, maybe deformed, maybe injured. But then I saw him again. This time, he was standing by a guardrail, miles from where I'd first seen him, in the exact same pose, arm raised, face tilted toward me. My stomach dropped. There was no way he could have gotten there ahead of me. Not in that storm, not without a vehicle. But there he was. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the truck's engine roaring as I pushed it faster than I normally dared in the rain. My eyes flicked to the mirrors. For a second, I swore I saw someone sitting in the passenger seat next to me, a wet outline in the corner of my vision. When I turned my head, the seat was empty. The CB radio hissed, just a burst of static, but under it, faintly, I thought I heard my name. I reached for the dial, but before I could touch it, the static cut off. Silence. My headlights picked up another shape ahead. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer, but as I drew closer, I saw it was a person, crawling on all fours across the road. Its limbs were long and spindly, moving in jerky, unnatural motions. Its head snapped toward me as I approached, and for an instant, I saw that same too-wide mouth, those too far-apart eyes. I swerved, tires screeching against the wet pavement. The rig fishtailed, and I fought the wheel, heart hammering in my chest. When I straightened out and looked in the mirror, the road was empty. No one crawling, no car, no hazards, just the rain and the endless blacktop. I knew then I had to stop. My hands were shaking too hard to keep driving. The next rest area was 15 miles ahead, and I prayed I could make it. The whispers started again, low at first, barely audible over the rain. My name, repeated softly, over and over from somewhere inside the cab. I flicked on the interior light. Empty. Just me. But the smell hit me then. Wet earth, rot, something like a dead animal left in the sun too long. It was coming from the sleeper berth behind me. I don't know what made me look. Some part of me didn't want to, but I did. There, in the dim glow of the cabin light, crouched a figure. It was the same thing I'd seen on the roadside. 2 long limbs, a face that didn't belong to anything human. Its skin glistened as if it were soaked through, and it grinned at me, lips peeling back to reveal teeth like broken glass. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding across the wet highway. I grabbed the door handle and threw myself out into the rain, landing hard on the pavement. The truck rolled to a stop a few feet away, engine still running. I stood there, chest heaving, rain pouring down my face, staring at the cab. The figure was gone. I climbed back in, trembling, every muscle taut. The sleeper berth was empty, the smell fading. My hands left wet prints on the wheel as I drove off again, this time refusing to look in the mirrors and refusing to glance at the passenger seat. I made it to the rest area just before dawn. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, the sky a sickly gray. The lot was empty except for one other truck, parked far off in the corner. I killed the engine and sat there, staring at my reflection in the windshield. Then I saw it. In the glass, faint but there, behind me. The same face, the same too-wide grin, watching. I spun around. Nothing, just the empty cab. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. When the sun rose, I started the engine and drove on, but the sense of being watched never left. Even now, months later, on different highways in different states, I catch glimpses. A figure by the roadside. A reflection where there shouldn't be one. Whispers in the static. I don't tell other drivers. They wouldn't believe me. They'd say it's fatigue, or stress, or too much caffeine. Maybe they're right, but deep down, I know what I saw. I know what I keep seeing. And I know it's not finished with me yet. Story the end. I'd been on the road for over 18 hours, hauling a refrigerated load of produce from Tennessee to Arizona. It was late September, and the nights were getting longer and colder. By the time I crossed into West Texas, the sun had set, and the desert stretched on endlessly, flat and empty. Out here, the only thing that keeps you company is your own headlights and the occasional long-haul rig rolling in the opposite direction. I wasn't tired yet, but the monotony of the highway had me on edge. I always ran night routes, but there's something about West Texas that feels wrong in the dark. There are stretches where you can go for hours without a single sign of life, and when you do, sometimes it isn't quite human. I was coming up on a small turnout when I saw a figure in the distance. At first, I thought it was another trucker, maybe someone pulling over to stretch. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't a trucker. It was a man, tall, thin, walking along the shoulder, thumb out. I slowed automatically, heart sinking. I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. Too many stories, too many warnings, too many drivers who never made it home. But something about this one, it didn't seem alive. His movements were stiff, almost jerky, like he was broken. His clothes were dark, ragged, and there was something over his shoulder. Wrapped in burlap, I thought at first. He didn't look cold. He didn't look scared. He just stared. I floored it and passed him. As I did, I caught a glimpse of his face. Pale, sunken eyes, and a mouth that was stretched too wide. I told myself it was a trick of the headlights, that my mind was playing games from fatigue. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he had followed me with his eyes. An hour later, I pulled off at a lonely truck stop to refuel. The place was almost empty, only a few rigs parked at a distance. As I climbed out to check the trailer, I noticed a shadow moving between the trucks. My stomach sank. I turned, and there he was, standing by the pumps, looking at me. Same tall, gaunt frame, the burlap bundle over his shoulder. I blinked, and he was gone. I climbed back in the cab, locked the doors, and tried to shake it off. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I glanced in the mirrors, I thought I saw him standing in the distance, at the edge of the lot, just watching. I got back on the highway, trying to push through. The CB was dead silent. No chatter, no warnings, nothing. Just static. And then I heard it. A soft dragging sound, faint but unmistakable, like something heavy being pulled along the shoulder of the road. I froze. The sound kept pace with me. I told myself it was the trailer, maybe some loose equipment in the back. But the sound was coming from outside. Every few miles, I'd catch glimpses of a dark shape in the distance, always at the edge of the headlight's reach, always moving parallel to me. It didn't run. It didn't try to catch up. It just followed. By the time I reached New Mexico, I was exhausted. I pulled off at a rest area, planning to sleep until morning. The lot was empty except for my rig. I killed the engine and crawled into the sleeper, leaving the curtain cracked so I could see outside. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching across the gravel. My flashlight hit the cab door, and there he was, standing there, staring in. The burlap bundle was gone, but his face, it was worse than I remembered. Pale, stretched, like it wasn't quite human, and his eyes black holes that seemed to pull the light out of the cab. I froze. Every instinct screamed to run, but the engine was cold, the keys in my pocket. I didn't move. He tapped on the window once, slow, deliberate, and then he whispered, barely audible over my own racing heart, "Let me ride." I jumped, fumbling for the keys. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped them. When I finally started the engine and hit the lights, he was gone. Not running, not hiding, gone. The lot was empty, silent, as if nothing had ever been there. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When the sun came up, I forced myself back on the road, putting as much distance as possible between me and that place. But I never stopped thinking about him. Weeks later, back home in Tennessee, I woke in the middle of the night to scratching on the side of the truck. I live in a rural area, and it was impossible for someone to be there without me knowing. I grabbed the flashlight, and at the edge of the beam, I saw a shadow standing just beyond the truck. Too tall, too thin, watching me. His mouth stretched wide in that same unnatural grin. I never sleep with the truck parked at home anymore. Every time I hear a noise, every time the wind rattles the windows, I feel him there, waiting, patient, knowing I'll have to get back on the road again. And I know that when I do, he'll be on the shoulder somewhere, waiting for me, dragging something heavy, whispering the same words, "Let me ride." Story. The end. It was a freezing January night, one of those bone-deep cold nights where the air feels heavier than usual and your breath clouds up thick in the cab. I'd been running a solo load from Amarillo, Texas to Denver, a route I'd done dozens of times. This time, though, dispatch sent me late because the shipment was delayed, so I found myself pushing north up US 287 after midnight. That stretch is lonely country, flat fields, old farmhouses sitting dark in the distance, and towns so small you blink and miss them. My trailer was full of medical supplies, nothing special, but the weight of it made the rig groan whenever the road climbed even slightly. I had the CB radio on low, some guy out of Oklahoma talking about a storm blowing in up north. I wasn't worried about the weather. I was worried about staying awake. I'd been driving nearly 14 hours and I was wired on gas station coffee and beef jerky. Around 1:30 a.m., the traffic vanished completely. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind, just me and the white lines stretching into blackness. I was somewhere near the Oklahoma-Colorado border when I first noticed the lights. They weren't headlights. At first glance, they looked like a dim glow off to the side of the road, like a porch light from a distant house. Then I realized it was moving, pacing me, maybe 100 feet off the shoulder in the open fields. A soft, bluish glow, keeping speed with my truck. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. Still there. Moving when I moved, slowing when I slowed. It wasn't a car. Too low to the ground, too smooth. It almost looked like someone carrying a lantern, but out there, in the middle of frozen nothing, I told myself I was just tired. Focus on the road. But the glow kept flickering at the edge of my vision, and soon I realized something else. It was getting closer. By the time I reached a long, straight stretch near a shuttered gas station, it was practically at the fence line next to the road. I could see no figure holding it, just the glow itself, bright and steady now, gliding along. I flipped on my high beams, craning my neck to see better. That was when my CB let out a burst of static, loud and sharp enough to make me jump. The channel was dead quiet after that, but I could swear, just for a second, I heard a voice in the static, a low whisper like someone saying my name. I cut the radio off and drove faster. My hands were slick on the wheel. Every time I glanced out the driver's side window, that blue glow was there, keeping pace. Then it darted ahead faster than I could blink and stopped right at the side of the road about 50 yards ahead. I slammed on the brakes. My trailer rattled and hissed as I brought the whole rig to a stop. In the middle of that empty highway, I stared at the glow. And then it changed. It rose higher, stretching, taking shape. The glow dimmed enough for me to see something inside it, a tall, thin figure. It wasn't solid, more like smoke shaped like a person. No face, no clothes, just a shifting outline. And though I couldn't hear it, I felt it, a pull, like pressure in my ears, like it was beckoning. I jammed the truck back into gear and floored it. My heart was hammering so loud I couldn't hear the engine. The glow blurred past my window, but I then disappeared behind me. I drove hard, didn't stop, didn't look back. An hour later, I finally saw a rest area sign. My nerves were shot. I swung in, parked under the brightest lamp, and killed the engine. My hands were still shaking. I sat there for a long time, telling myself it was a trick of the light, a hallucination from lack of sleep. Then I noticed the inside of the cab felt colder. My breath was visible in the beam of my dashboard light. And then I smelled something, an acrid ozone-like smell, sharp and electric. I reached over for my thermos and froze. My passenger seat, which had been empty all night, was wet. Not spilled coffee, not condensation, just wet as if someone had sat there in dripping clothes. The seatbelt was buckled. I left the engine off, grabbed my jacket, and got out. Stood there in the freezing wind under that buzzing lamp, staring at my own truck like it belonged to someone else. I didn't go back inside for almost an hour. By dawn, the seat had dried, the smell had faded, but the buckle was still clicked in, and I know for a fact I never touched it. I've driven that route a dozen times since. I've never seen the blue glow again. But sometimes, on long nights, the CB will spit out a quick burst of static and I'll hear my name whispered in it. And every now and then, when I glance at the passenger seat, I swear I see a damp outline where no one should be sitting. Story the end. The asphalt stretched endlessly ahead, slick with the recent rain, reflecting the pale orange glow of Joe Harlan's headlights. He had been driving for over 12 hours, hauling a refrigerated load of produce from Dallas to Kansas City. Normally, long hauls didn't bother him. He was used to the solitude, but tonight felt different. There was an unnatural quiet over the road, the kind of stillness that made him hyper-aware of every sound. The wind rattling the trailer, tires hissing over wet pavement, the faint drip of rain from the truck's mirrors. He shook his head. It was just fatigue. He'd been through nights like this before. Somewhere near Wichita, he passed a faded green sign warning of a long stretch with no services. Joe grunted. He knew the highway and he knew the stops, but tonight he had a gnawing sense of unease. As he pressed on, the road narrowed and the rain began to fall harder. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up, that streaking the glass in uneven motions. That's when he first saw it, a figure on the shoulder, barely illuminated by the dim glow of his headlights. Joe slowed instinctively. The figure was tall, hunched slightly, wearing what looked like a dark hoodie. It didn't move as he approached. It just stood there, perfectly still. Joe's pulse quickened. He didn't normally stop for hitchhikers, especially at night on a desolate highway, but something about the figure's posture, rigid, unnatural, made him hesitate. The figure lifted its head slowly, and Joe caught a glimpse of its face. Hollow, pale, and expressionless, with eyes too black to be human. The truck jolted under his shaking hands as he slammed the accelerator, forcing himself past without a backward glance. For the next few hours, Joe couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Shadows moved at the edge of his headlights, fleeting shapes that vanished when he tried to focus. The CB radio crackled, static at first, then a faint, distorted whisper, "You can't hide." Joe cursed under his breath and switched channels, but every frequency was filled with the same low, rasping voice. He told himself it was exhaustion, hallucinations, something his mind was conjuring to fill the empty highway. Around 3 a.m., he decided to stop at a small, isolated rest area just past Newton. He pulled the rig into a corner, far from the few other trucks parked there. The rain had stopped, leaving the night damp and heavy. He climbed out to stretch, shivering despite the jacket he wore. That's when he saw the footprints. They were enormous, larger than a man's, wide and deep, pressed into the wet asphalt. They circled the rig, coming from nowhere and disappearing toward the tree line on the far side of the parking lot. Joe's stomach knotted. He stepped back, heart hammering, and climbed back into the cab, locking the doors. He tried to tell himself it was a prank, a trucker messing with him, but the lot was empty. No other vehicles had arrived, no one was around. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the trailer, every distant rustle of leaves made him flinch. Around 4 a.m., he heard it. Soft tapping on the metal siding. At first, he thought it was the rain, the trailer cooling, anything but reality. But the taps became deliberate, spaced, echoing along the side of the rig. Then a low, guttural sigh came from just outside the cab. Joe grabbed a tire iron, his hands trembling, and cracked the door slightly. Nothing. Only the damp darkness and the faint echo of the sigh. By dawn, he was shaking uncontrollably. The footprints were gone, and the lot looked normal, as if nothing had happened. But Joe knew it had. Something had been there, watching, waiting. He didn't stop again until he reached Kansas City, refusing to leave the cab for anything but fuel. Weeks later, the incidents escalated. On longer runs, he would see figures on the side of the highway, sometimes a dozen, always still, always staring. The CB would pick up whispers of his name, voices so faint he wasn't sure if he was hearing them or imagining them. One night near Topeka, he woke in his cab to find a figure sitting in the passenger seat, head bowed, unmoving. When he turned on the interior light, the seat was empty, but a smear of dirt and something darker marked the fabric. He began avoiding rest areas entirely, driving through nights without stopping, eating cold food in the cab, drinking coffee to stay awake. But no matter what he did, the feeling persisted. He was being followed, observed, hunted. Once, he stopped at a well-lit truck stop in Joplin, thinking the presence would vanish in company. It didn't. Outside the windows, figures moved between the rigs, slipping between shadows, always just out of reach. The other drivers didn't see them. Joe didn't speak of it. Who would believe him? It got worse. One stormy night near Columbia, the rig's electronics failed completely. Engine, lights, radio, GPS, all dead. Joe was stranded on the shoulder of a deserted interstate. He heard footsteps circling the truck, slow, measured, impossible in the wet gravel. Knocking on the cab doors, whispers, and the unmistakable scraping sound of claws across metal. He tried to start the engine, but it wouldn't turn over. The presence grew closer, pressing against the cab, breathing cold into his face. Then, just as suddenly, the electronics came back online. The shadow was gone, but Joe knew it hadn't left. After that, he refused solo hauls. He only drove in convoys, stayed in busy truck stops, never stopped on isolated roads. But even in daylight, even surrounded by other drivers, the unease never left him. Shadows lingered where none should be, reflections in mirrors that didn't belong to anyone, whispers in the CB static. Joe eventually sold the rig, moved to a small town in Missouri, and tried to live a normal life. But the fear never fully left. Some nights, when the wind rattles the windows and the house creaks in the darkness, he swears he hears the faint hum of a diesel engine in the distance. And he knows, deep down, that one night, if he ever ventures onto an empty highway again, the figures will be waiting, patient, relentless, and impossible to escape. Story the end. It was a little after 2 a.m. when I crossed from Arkansas into Louisiana on US 165, hauling a full load of paper rolls to Baton Rouge. I'd been behind the wheel since early that morning, only stopping for fuel and a bathroom break. The road was empty except for the occasional set of headlights drifting past in the opposite lane. The radio had gone to static 20 minutes back. My phone showed no service, and the only company I had was the low rumble of my Freightliner's diesel engine. I'd driven nights for years. I liked the quiet, but that stretch of highway felt too quiet, like even the trees were holding their breath. By 3 a.m., I'd had enough. My eyelids felt like lead, and my stomach grumbled from living on gas station coffee and jerky. I spotted a tiny rest area sign and flicked on my blinker. The rest area turned out to be nothing more than a patch of cracked asphalt, with a single picnic table under a warped tin shelter. The state must have forgotten about it decades ago. No lights, no building, just the woods pressing in from all sides, blacker than tar. I eased the truck onto the far edge of the lot, engine brakes hissing, and set the parking brake. My headlights cut a narrow path into the trees. The moment I killed the lights, darkness swallowed the rig whole. The only sound was the ping of cooling metal and the cicadas screaming from the brush. I climbed out to stretch, the night air damp and heavy, smelling of swamp. My boots crunched on broken glass and gravel. The picnic table sat crooked under the shelter, covered in graffiti and moss. Something about the place felt wrong, too empty, too forgotten, but I'd been tired before and let my nerves talk me into skipping breaks. Not tonight. I needed to rest before I wound up in a ditch. I did a quick walk around of the rig, flashlight beam dancing across the tires and straps. Everything looked fine. No leaks, no loose chains. I was just about to climb back into the cab when I heard it. It was faint at first, like a footstep in the leaves. Then another, slow, measured, coming from the tree line. I swung the flashlight toward the sound. Just trees, branches tangled thick, Spanish moss hanging like curtains. No eyeshine, no movement. The woods looked like a black wall. I told myself it was a deer or a raccoon or anything normal. But when I climbed back into the cab and shut the door, something tapped the side of the trailer. 1, 2, 3 slow taps, like a knuckle on metal. My heart stopped. I whipped around, pressing my face to the passenger window. The asphalt glistened under the beam of my flashlight, empty. No one there, no animal, nothing. I locked both doors and sat back, listening. The cicadas had gone silent, total stillness, like the whole world was holding its breath. Then came another tap, this time from the back of the cab right by the sleeper. Jesus Christ, I muttered, fumbling for the CB mic. Breaker 19. Anyone out there near mile marker 53? Someone's messing with my truck. Static hissed back at me. Then, in a low voice that didn't sound human, came the reply. You shouldn't have stopped. I dropped the mic, my hands slick with sweat. Who is this? I shouted. Get the hell out of here. Nothing. I fired up the engine, headlights blazing. For a second, everything looked normal. The empty lot, the crooked picnic table, the dark woods. Then my headlights caught it. A figure stood just at the tree line, tall and thin, its arms hanging too long, fingers almost reaching its knees. Its clothes were shredded, soaked dark. Its skin, or what I could see of it, looked grayish white, like wax. The head was tilted at an impossible angle, and the eyes were black pits that caught the light but didn't reflect it. It didn't move. It didn't blink. I threw the truck in gear and floored it. Gravel spit from the tires as I roared out of the lot and back onto the highway. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. In the side mirror, the figure was still there, but it wasn't shrinking the way it should as I sped off. For a heartbeat, it looked like it was keeping pace, gliding along the shoulder, head still tilted, eyes locked on mine. Then it vanished. I drove for 2 straight hours, high beams cutting through the dark until the first hints of dawn touched the horizon. I stopped at a truck stop outside Alexandria, a big, well-lit place with cameras and other rigs parked in neat rows. I figured I'd be safe there. When I climbed out of the cab, a gas attendant pointed at my trailer. "Man, what happened there?" I turned and my stomach dropped. Along the side of the trailer ran long, deep scratches, 5 of them, perfectly parallel, like something with claws had raked the steel from one end to the other. The paint had curled where the gouges dug in. I couldn't explain it. I still can't. For the next month, the calls started. Unknown numbers. Always the same message whispered into the receiver. You shouldn't have stopped. Sometimes it was, I'm still here. Once it was, check your mirror. I started avoiding small rest areas, sticking only to big truck stops, even if it meant driving longer. But no matter where I went, I'd hear it some nights, the tap, tap, tap against the sleeper. Once at a way station in Mississippi, I caught a glimpse of something pale and thin standing under a bridge in my mirror, watching me as I rolled past. I quit long-haul runs soon after, took a local job hauling groceries. I don't drive that stretch of US 165 anymore. But sometimes in the dark, parked in my own driveway, I hear it, soft, deliberate, something dragging along the side of my truck. And every time my phone rings from an unknown number, I let it go to voicemail. Because I know if I answer, I'll hear that same voice telling me what I already know. You shouldn't have stopped. Story the end. I've been on the road long enough to know the difference between something strange and something dangerous. Most of the time, it's just fatigue messing with your head. Reflections in the mirrors, shadows shifting across the highway, a shape on the shoulder that turns out to be an old tire. But in 2016, on a run from Oklahoma City to a distribution center outside of Atlanta, I learned there are things out there that are worse than shadows, worse than fatigue, and worse than anything you'd ever want to meet face to face. I left Oklahoma City at dusk with a refrigerated trailer full of produce. The weather was clear, the route straightforward. I-40 east through Arkansas, then south into Mississippi, and across Alabama into Georgia. I'd done the run before and figured it would be uneventful. But the thing about the interstate at night is how quickly it can change from busy and comforting to empty and wrong. By midnight, I was well into eastern Arkansas and the road had gone quiet. No cars, no lights, no nothing. I just passed a small exit when I noticed a flicker of movement in my mirrors. A car? No, too small. Maybe an animal darting across the highway? But then I caught it again. A figure at the edge of my headlights, walking along the shoulder. As I got closer, I realized it was a man. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, and carrying something long in his hand like a stick or a crowbar. He didn't even look up as my rig thundered past, just kept walking. A few miles later, I saw another one. Same build, same clothes, same long object in his hand, walking the same way down the shoulder. That's when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. One person on the shoulder in the middle of the night is nothing. 2 miles apart, dressed the same, carrying the same thing, that's not nothing. I turned up the CB hoping for chatter, but the air was dead. No one out here but me. The miles stretched and my eyes started to play tricks on me. Every reflective sign looked like a silhouette. Every shadow felt like it was moving. I tried to shake it off. An hour later, I was nearing a rest area. I figured I'd stop for coffee and a bathroom break. As I pulled into the lot, my headlights swept across the parking area and froze. There, standing at the far edge of the lot under a dead street lamp, was one of them. tall, dark clothes, long object in hand. He wasn't walking anymore. He was standing still, facing me. I slowed but didn't stop, pulling into a spot near the exit so I could get out quick if I had to. I killed the engine, sat still, and kept my eyes on him. He didn't move, didn't look away, just stood there. I got out of the cab slowly, feeling the warm night air press against my skin. The place was quiet, except for the hum of my refrigeration unit. I walked toward the vending machine, pretending like I didn't see him. My boots crunched on the gravel, every sound too loud. I could feel him watching me. I put money in the machine, grabbed a soda, and turned. He was closer now, maybe 20 feet away. I hadn't seen him move, but he was definitely closer. The long thing in his hand glinted faintly under the weak light. It wasn't a stick. It was a piece of rebar or a pipe. I backed toward my truck slowly, heart hammering. "You need something, man," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. No answer. He just tilted his head slightly like he was curious. Then, from the tree line behind him, another shape stepped out. Same build, same clothes, same pipe in hand. I didn't wait to see more. I sprinted to my cab, jumped in, and slammed the locks down. My hands shook as I jammed the key in the ignition, fired up the engine, and threw it into gear. As I pulled out of the lot, my headlights swept over the rest area again, and I saw them. 3, maybe 4 figures now, all standing in a line at the edge of the lot, facing me, pipes in hand. I hit the accelerator and didn't look back. My rig roared down the ramp and back onto the interstate. My mirrors stayed empty for a long time, but I couldn't stop glancing at them, half expecting to see headlights or shapes chasing me down the road. By the time I reached Memphis, the sun was coming up, and my nerves were shot. I pulled into a busy truck stop and parked under the brightest lights I could find. I stayed in that cab all day, curtains drawn, engine idling, just trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I'd seen. But I knew better. I asked around a few weeks later, careful not to sound crazy. An older driver told me he'd heard stories about the pipe men on certain stretches of I-40, guys who hang around isolated rest stops, waiting for someone to get out of their cab. Sometimes people disappear. Sometimes their trucks are found stripped and abandoned miles down the road. Nobody ever catches them. Nobody ever finds out who they are. All I know is that night changed the way I run my routes. I don't stop at dark rest areas anymore. I don't pull off for anyone on the shoulder. And every time I see a lone figure walking along the highway, my stomach turns to ice, because I know there's probably more than one, and they're waiting. Story. The end. The night was thick and heavy as I rolled out of a truck stop in rural New Mexico. I had a load of construction equipment strapped down on a flatbed, headed to Colorado Springs. It was a little after 1 a.m., and the road ahead stretched like a black ribbon into the mountains. The CB was quiet, my coffee was lukewarm, and the only company I had was the low rumble of my engine and the occasional tumbleweed blowing across the highway. I'd been on the road for 20 years, and I thought I'd seen just about everything. Bad accidents, freak storms, drunks swerving across lanes, but that night reminded me how wrong I was. It started small. A flicker of lights behind me, far back on the empty stretch of US 285. Nothing unusual, another vehicle catching up. But as the miles passed, it didn't gain or fall back. It stayed perfectly in my rear view, headlights faint but steady, like it was tethered to my bumper. The longer it stayed there, the more wrong it felt. I slowed down, so did it. I sped up, it did too. No attempt to pass, no CB chatter, no logos on the grill, just 2 white headlights burning through the darkness, keeping pace. Around 2:30 a.m., I pulled into a small rest area to use the bathroom and stretch my legs. It was the kind of place only truckers and desperate travelers stop at. One flickering lamppost, a couple of vending machines, and a bathroom that smelled like bleach. When I climbed back into my cab, I saw it at the far end of the lot. A truck. Black. No markings. Engine idling. I watched it for a while, hoping the driver would get out. Nobody did. The cab windows were too dark to see inside, and the engine's hum was just audible over the wind. I figured maybe it was coincidence, another driver heading north at the same time. I fired up my rig and rolled back onto the highway. Within minutes, its headlights appeared again. This time, closer, it followed me as I wound deeper into the mountain foothills, where the road narrowed and the pine trees rose like sentinels on either side. My GPS glitched, spinning and recalculating, even though the route was straight. The CB hissed with static, then went silent. The fog started about 20 miles from the state line. It rolled in fast, swallowing the beams of my headlights until I could barely see the yellow lines on the road. My hands tightened on the wheel. The truck behind me drew closer still, so close I could see its grille in my mirror. Plain black steel, no emblem, no plate. Then the whispers started. At first, I thought it was my radio. Low, murmuring voices, impossible to make out. I turned the radio off. The whispers stayed. They came from the corners of the cab, soft and urgent, like someone crouched just behind my seat, talking fast. I tried to drown it out, blasting my air horn, but the sound came back louder, overlapping dozens of voices, all in a language I couldn't understand. My heart hammered in my chest. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the needle creeping past 70, 75. The truck behind me matched every mile per hour. The fog thickened until it felt like driving through wet cement. The road vanished under me. And then, up ahead, a shape appeared, another truck, parked sideways across both lanes. No lights, no reflectors, just a black mass blocking the road. I slammed the brakes, tires screeching, my trailer fishtailing dangerously. The whispers turned into a single long moan that made my ears ache. I flicked on my high beams. The truck ahead wasn't empty. Something stood in front of it. It was a figure. Tall. Wrong. Its arms hung too long, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. The skin was pale, stretched tight over bone, eyes black pits. Its mouth opened, but no sound came out. My whole body froze, a cold sweat soaking through my shirt. I yanked the wheel hard, swerving onto the shoulder. My trailer clipped the guardrail, sparks flying. I didn't care. I just wanted to get past. As I roared by, I glanced in my mirror. The black truck behind me was gone. The figure was gone. For a few minutes, the fog thinned and the road returned. My GPS snapped back to normal. The whispers stopped, but I couldn't stop shaking. My hands were welded to the steering wheel, my heart still pounding in my ears. When I finally pulled into a well-lit gas station near Alamosa at dawn, I sat in my cab for 20 minutes, staring at my mirrors, waiting for those headlights to appear again. They didn't. The clerk said I looked pale as a ghost when I came inside. I just mumbled something about road fatigue. A week later, at a truck stop outside Pueblo, another driver told me about a phantom rig that stalks truckers through the mountains at night. He said it had no plates, no driver, no logos. Said it followed him for hours on a foggy road, then disappeared. I didn't tell him my story. I didn't want to hear it out loud. But since that night, I don't take mountain routes at night anymore. I plan my trips so I'm parked before midnight, and when the fog rolls in, I stay put, no matter how late it makes me. But sometimes when I'm driving those long, empty stretches at dawn, I see a pair of headlights in my mirror, perfectly even, perfectly steady, like they're waiting for me to notice. And deep down, I know it's not just another trucker. It's something else, something that waits for the lonely ones, the tired ones, the ones who think they're alone out there. Some trucks aren't driven by anyone you'd want to meet. Some figures on the roadside aren't people at all. And some nights, when the whispers start in the cab and the fog rolls thick and fast, you just keep driving and pray you'll make it to morning. Story. The end. The highway through rural Arkansas was almost completely empty. Nothing but a thin gray strip cutting through a landscape of dark pine woods and endless shadows. My rig's headlights carved tunnels in the mist rising from the ditches, and the drone of the diesel engine filled the cab. It was just after midnight. Midsummer, but strangely cool. The kind of night where the trees don't move, but you feel like something's moving out there anyway. I was hauling lumber from Louisiana up towards Springfield, Missouri. 22 years behind the wheel, and still sometimes the road gave me that feeling, like I wasn't alone even when I knew I was. The first odd thing happened just after I crossed the state line. A shape appeared on the shoulder, so pale it caught my eyes even before the headlights reached it. I slowed a little, thinking it might be a deer or a person broken down, but as I drew closer, I saw it was a man standing perfectly still at the white line, arms at his sides, staring straight ahead. He was barefoot, wearing only a white shirt and pants so thin they clung to his body. His head was cocked slightly to one side, like a curious bird. I passed him at 50 miles an hour and checked the mirror immediately. Nothing. He wasn't there anymore. No way he could have stepped off the road that fast. I told myself it was a trick of the fog and kept driving. About 30 miles later, near a shuttered gas station with a broken sign, I stopped to stretch my legs. The place had a couple of busted pumps, a soda machine, and weeds growing through the cracked concrete. I walked around the rig once, checked the straps on my load, and then froze. On the other side of the lot, under the dim glow of a security light, the same man was standing there. Same pale clothes, same tilted head, watching me. I called out, "You okay, buddy?" No answer. He didn't move. I backed toward the cab, trying to keep my voice calm. "You need a ride?" Nothing. Just that fixed stare. My skin crawled. I climbed in, locked the door, and fired up the engine. When I looked back through the windshield, he was gone. For the next hour, every curve of the highway felt wrong. The woods seemed to lean in closer, and the air in the cab grew heavy, like I was breathing someone else's breath. I kept flicking my eyes to the mirrors. Twice I thought I saw movement in the trailer's reflection, like a shadow darting along the metal, but when I turned my head, it was gone. I turned on the radio to drown it out, but all I got was static. It rose and fell in a way that almost sounded like whispering. I shut it off. Past midnight, somewhere between Harrison and Marshall, the road dipped into a long valley. The mist was so thick I could only see a few truck lengths ahead. That was when the knocking started. Light at first, tap, tap from the back of the cab, right where the sleeper started. I froze, hands on the wheel. It came again, tap, tap, tap. Then silence. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I pulled into a tiny roadside park, a couple of picnic tables, no lights, just gravel and trees, and stopped. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed out, the beam trembling in my shaking hand. I walked slowly around the rig. The mist muffled every sound. No one was there. No footprints in the gravel. But as I swung the light up onto the trailer, my stomach dropped. There were streaks running down the side, dark and wet. They weren't rainwater. They were handprints, smears of something brownish, almost black, trailing from the top edge of the trailer down to the wheels as if someone had dragged their hands along it while clinging on. I bolted back into the cab and slammed the locks. The knocking started again immediately, this time from the passenger side door. Slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. I stared at the handle, half expecting it to start turning on its own. "Get the hell out of here," I shouted, but my voice cracked. The knocking stopped. I sat there for what felt like hours, engine idling, until finally I forced myself to drive. The mist followed me for another 10 miles, then thinned out. By the time I reached the next truck stop outside of Marshall, dawn was breaking. I pulled into a slot between two other rigs, grateful for the company of other humans. I climbed out, legs trembling, and went to check the trailer again in daylight. The smears were gone. The metal was clean, as if nothing had ever touched it. Inside the diner, the waitress, a young woman with a cross tattoo on her wrist, noticed me staring blankly into my coffee. I told her about the pale man on the road, the knocking, the handprints. Her face drained of color. She said quietly, "My uncle was a trucker, died on this route. Rolled his rig after he swerved to miss a man standing barefoot in the middle of the road. Folks around here say he still tries to hitch rides." I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. I just finished my coffee, went back to my truck, and sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the side mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw him there again. Pale face, tilted head, standing by the edge of the lot. Then a semi rolled past and he was gone. I still haul freight, still drive nights. But every time I'm on that stretch of 65 through the Arkansas hills, I keep my eyes on the center line and never ever stop unless there are other trucks around. And if I ever see a barefoot man at the side of the road again, I won't even glance at him, because I'm afraid that if I do, he might decide to climb aboard. Story the end. The stretch of highway between Amarillo, Texas, and Tucumcari, New Mexico had always felt different to me, even before what happened that night. It was a straight, lonely line of asphalt cutting through the desert, with hardly a gas station or a flicker of light for miles. The radio would fade to static out there, cell service dropped to nothing, and the sky above felt enormous, too big, like it was pressing down on you. It was about 2 a.m, and I was hauling a refrigerated load of meat from Dallas to Phoenix. I'd been driving since early afternoon, eyes gritty, nerves frayed, the cab filled with the faint hum of the cooler unit in the trailer. By the time I crossed into the New Mexico side of the highway, the desert had gone from warm to freezing, the temperature plummeting as the wind picked up. Sand whispered across the road in thin, ghostly veils, catching in the headlights. I slowed my rig and leaned forward, scanning for movement. I'd driven this route plenty of times, but something about the night felt off. I passed an abandoned gas station around mile marker 252. At least, I think that's what it was. It had no sign, no pumps anymore, just a crumbling building with dark windows like eye sockets. I caught a flash of movement in one of those windows as I rolled by, like someone ducking out of sight. I shook my head, telling myself it was just the shadows. A few miles later, I saw something in the road ahead. At first, I thought it was debris, maybe a tire or a chunk of metal, but as I got closer, I realized it was a person. A woman, standing dead center in the lane, barefoot, wearing a white nightgown that snapped in the wind. Her hair was long, matted, and hung over her face. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stood there. I slammed the brakes and leaned on the horn, the sound echoing across the empty desert. She didn't flinch. My heart hammered. I couldn't just run her over. I slowed to a crawl and stopped about 20 feet away, hazard lights flashing. I rolled the passenger window down a crack and shouted, "You okay? You need help?" She didn't answer. She didn't even look up. The wind carried a faint, high-pitched sound, almost like humming, but it might have been the trailer cooler. I grabbed my flashlight, climbed out of the cab, and stepped into the cold. My boots crunched on the asphalt. "Ma'am," I called again, keeping my distance. "Are you hurt?" She raised her head slowly. Her eyes were wide but wrong, glassy, like she wasn't really seeing me. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Just that faint humming, louder now. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. "Look, I'll call the cops for you," I said, backing up toward the cab. "Just stay put." Then she blinked and was gone. 1 second she was standing there, the next she wasn't. The lane ahead of me was empty. No footprints on the asphalt. No sign she'd ever been there. My breath came fast and shallow. I spun in a slow circle, scanning the desert. Nothing. I jumped back into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the truck in gear. I pulled forward, checking the mirrors every few seconds. All I saw was the empty road stretching behind me. 5 miles later, I glanced at the passenger side mirror and nearly swerved off the road. She was there, sitting in the passenger seat. Her face was turned toward me now, her hair pushed back just enough to show a pale cheek, those wide, glassy eyes, and a faint, eerie smile. She was humming, the same sound I'd heard outside. My stomach flipped. I didn't think. I slammed the brakes, yanked the door open, and jumped out, nearly twisting my ankle on the pavement. The cab lights glared down on me as I backed away, heart pounding. I stared up at the passenger seat. Empty. I circled the truck twice with my flashlight, checking the trailer, the steps, the space beneath. Nothing. I climbed back in, locked the doors, and floored it, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel. For the next 20 miles, I didn't see her, but I could hear the humming. Soft, just under the engine noise. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. I turned the radio up, but it cut through the static. I started muttering to myself, anything to drown it out. I finally reached a truck stop just outside Tucumcari. The place was mostly empty, just one other rig parked under the buzzing lights. I pulled in, shut off the engine, and sat there, breathing hard. The humming had stopped. My cab felt normal again. I told myself I was exhausted, that it had to be a hallucination. I'd been awake too long. I climbed into the sleeper, boots still on, and closed my eyes. Sometime later, I woke up. The cab was dark except for the faint glow from the dashboard. The other truck in the lot was gone, and someone was standing outside my driver's side window. It was her. She was inches from the glass, hands pressed against it, her eyes staring in. Her mouth was moving, humming that same tune, but I couldn't hear it now. I was too terrified to move. I lunged for the ignition, but the engine wouldn't turn over. I kept twisting the key over and over, nothing but dead clicks. She tilted her head slowly, like a predator studying prey. Then she smiled, wider this time, showing teeth. The lights flickered once, twice. When they came back on, she was gone. The engine roared to life. I threw the truck into gear and tore out of that lot so fast my trailer swung. I didn't stop until I hit Albuquerque. Hours later, shaking, running on fumes. I've been driving trucks for 22 years. I've seen bad wrecks, storms, drunks, people doing crazy things on the highway, but I've never seen anything like her. Other drivers talk about road ghosts out here, the vanishing hitchhiker, the phantom woman in white. I never believed them. Not until that night. Now I don't stop for anyone. I don't pull over at abandoned gas stations, and I don't drive the Amarillo-Tucumcari stretch after midnight. But sometimes, when the desert wind rattles my cab just right, I swear I hear it again. That soft, eerie humming floating just below the sound of the engine. Story the end. It was a bitterly cold January night when Jake Hawk Hawkins took a run from Minneapolis down to New Orleans, hauling a load of auto parts. Hawk had been trucking for nearly 2 decades, and the long winter nights didn't usually faze him. He liked the solitude, the empty roads, the hum of the diesel under his cab. But that night, something felt wrong. Not at first, just a subtle tightening in his chest, like the darkness outside the windshield was thicker than usual. He left the city just after midnight, heading south on I-35. The highways were empty, nothing but the occasional distant glimmer of headlights. About 2 hours into the drive, his CB crackled with static, followed by a faint whisper he couldn't make out. He twisted the dial, thinking it was another driver, but no one responded. The whisper repeated a few times, always just at the edge of audibility, and then nothing. Hawk shrugged it off as fatigue and continued driving, focusing on the glowing lines of the road ahead. A little past Albert Lee, Minnesota, he noticed a car in his rear view. Old, black, a sedan from the early 90s. It wasn't unusual to see cars late at night, but there was something off. The headlights stayed on, perfectly aligned with his rig, and the car matched his speed exactly. Hawk tried speeding up, slowing down, changing lanes, but the vehicle mirrored every move. He reached for the CB. "Breaker! Breaker! Who's riding with me here?" Silence. Just static. And the whisper again, soft and urgent, curling around his thoughts. Hawk's unease grew, but he kept driving, telling himself it was probably some idiot playing games on the highway. The night grew colder, and fog began to rise from the frozen fields lining the road. Visibility dropped, and Hawk slowed his rig to keep control. That's when he first saw the figure on the road. At first, he thought it was a deer, but its shape was wrong, too tall, too thin, limbs bent at unnatural angles. Hawk slammed the brakes, fishtailing the trailer. The figure didn't move like an animal. It crawled toward the road, dragging itself forward with one arm, jerking in disjointed motions. Its skin was pale and torn, its face grotesque, twisted in a silent scream. Hawk swore he saw eyes glinting in the dim light, reflecting his own headlights. He floored the accelerator, tires spinning as he tried to put distance between himself and the thing. The black sedan stayed behind, unmoving, almost hovering as if riding the fog itself. Hawk's heart pounded. He had heard stories from other drivers, tales of phantom cars and shadows on desolate highways, but he'd never believed them. Now he was living one. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Hawk couldn't tell. The road twisted, sometimes familiar, sometimes unfamiliar. He drove past towns that seemed abandoned, gas stations with lights flickering but no one inside. Every time he slowed, he felt the presence of the black sedan closer, watching, waiting. Near Des Moines, Iowa, Hawk thought he saw someone walking along the shoulder. He braked, heart hammering, but when he focused, the figure vanished. The fog was thick now, clinging to the ground, rising into his headlights like a living thing. Whispers crackled through the CB intermittently, overlapping, frantic, unintelligible. Hawk kept his eyes on the road, gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles ached. Then the black sedan appeared directly in his lane. Hawk swerved, barely missing it. The figure from earlier, the tall, crawling thing, emerged again from the fog, standing in the middle of the asphalt this time. Its limbs jerked like broken marionettes. Its face, twisted and pale, stared at him as if recognizing him, knowing him. Hawk screamed, slamming the brakes, tires locking, trailer jackknifing slightly. The sedan disappeared. The creature vanished. The fog remained, clinging to the edges of the road like a living curtain. Hawk didn't stop. He drove faster, ignoring speed limits, signs, sanity. He passed an overpass near Ottumwa, thinking he saw the sedan on it, engine running, waiting. Hawk blinked, and it was gone. By the time he reached Missouri, Hawk was exhausted, trembling. He tried calling dispatch, but his phone had no signal. Every rest area was empty, every diner abandoned. The roads seemed to stretch endlessly, loops forming where they shouldn't. The fog, the whispers, the shadows, they were relentless. Somewhere near Springfield, he finally saw lights on a horizon. Relief washed over him. A small truck stop, neon glowing, cars parked. Hawk pulled in, shaking uncontrollably, convinced he had escaped. But when he stepped out of the cab, the black sedan was parked behind him, like perfectly aligned with his trailer. No driver. Interior light on. Hawk froze. Then the whispers returned, clearer, calling his name, urgent and low. He ran back into the cab, started the engine, and floored it, barely navigating the lot to get onto the highway again. The sedan didn't follow this time, at least not immediately. Hawk kept driving, dawn breaking behind him, fog thinning, but he never felt safe. Even years later, Hawk refused nighttime runs. He only drove in daylight, taking longer routes, never alone. But sometimes, when he passes the rural highways he used to take, he swears he sees the black sedan waiting, lurking just beyond the tree line, fog curling around its tires. And on quiet nights, the whispers return on his CB, soft, insistent, reminding him that the highway is patient, that it never forgets, and that it always waits for those who travel it too far, too late, and too alone. Hawk never stopped being a trucker, but he stopped believing he was ever truly safe on the road. He never spoke of it much, but any driver who's spent hours alone on the highway at night knows the truth. The road is alive, it watches, and sometimes it reaches out. Story the end. It was late November when I picked up a load out of Amarillo bound for Salt Lake City. A simple haul, mostly dry goods, no special handling, but it was going to be a long, lonely run across New Mexico and into the Utah desert. I've been a trucker for almost 15 years, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the road at night has a personality all its own. Empty interstates can feel like another planet. Some nights you feel free, others you feel watched. That night was one of those nights. The first stretch out of Amarillo was uneventful. I had my coffee, my CB crackling with idle chatter from drivers miles away. The sun dropped behind me and the sky turned black without much warning. Out here, you don't get the glow of cities on the horizon. It's just you, the road, and whatever's out there in the dark. I had another 300 miles to go before my next fuel stop, and I figured I'd make good time if I pushed through. Around 11:30 p.m., somewhere near the New Mexico state line, I noticed headlights behind me. A single pair, low to the ground like an old sedan. Nothing strange at first. But what got my attention was how they appeared out of nowhere. 1 minute the road behind me was empty. The next, this car was just there, its headlights small and steady, but too bright. I checked my mirrors, my speed. I was cruising a little over the limit, but not enough to draw heat. The car stayed behind me, keeping a perfect distance, mile after mile. I slowed. It slowed. I sped up. It sped up. I figured maybe it was another driver pacing himself, but something about it felt wrong. The way the lights bounced didn't match the bumps in the road. They almost glided, and they didn't flicker when they hit dips or rises. They stayed exactly level, like they weren't really headlights at all, but some kind of glow. My palms started to sweat on the steering wheel. I told myself to relax. Long hauls make you see weird stuff. I passed a rest area and considered pulling in, but the place was completely dark. No lights, no cars. It looked abandoned. I kept going. That's when the headlights behind me grew brighter and closer until they filled my mirrors. I flipped on my hazards to signal them to pass. They didn't. Instead, they eased even closer, so close I couldn't see the front of the car anymore. Just the light. My heart started hammering. I gripped the wheel and muttered, "What the hell are you doing?" under my breath. Suddenly, the glow winked out. Just gone. 1 second blinding me, the next nothing. I twisted in my seat, staring into the blackness behind me. Empty highway, no car, no glow. Nothing. My scalp prickled. I turned my eyes back to the road and tried to breathe. My coffee tasted like ash. My CB was dead quiet now. No chatter. Just static. About 30 miles later, the temperature in my cab dropped. I don't mean the usual cool you get with night driving. It felt like stepping into a freezer. My breath fogged the windshield. My gauges all read normal, but my bones ached with cold. That's when I heard it, a faint tapping from the sleeper behind me. Tap, 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 like knuckles on metal. I swallowed hard, keeping my eyes on the road. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself. "Just the truck settling." The tapping got louder. Tap, 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 tap. I glanced in my rearview mirror and for a split second thought I saw movement behind me, in the dark of the sleeper. A shape, thin, upright. I nearly swerved off the road. When I whipped my head around, nothing was there. My throat was dry, my hands shaking. I locked the sleeper door from the driver's seat, something I'd never done in 15 years of hauling. I drove like that for another hour, eyes flicking from the road to the mirrors, back and forth. The cold in the cab wouldn't go away. My breath fogged thicker. Then, just past a small exit for a nowhere town, I saw it in my mirrors. Not headlights this time, a figure. Walking in the middle of the lane behind me. Its arms were long, almost reaching its knees, its head tilted at an impossible angle. It didn't run, it just walked, step by step, keeping up with a truck doing 65 miles an hour. I blinked hard, thinking I was hallucinating. When I looked again, it was closer. I slammed the gas pedal, the engine roaring as I pushed past 75. I risked another glance in the mirror. The figure was gone. My stomach twisted. My mouth tasted like copper. I drove faster than I should have, ignoring the curves and dips, just wanting out of that stretch of road. At 3 a.m., I finally pulled into a well-lit truck stop outside Gallup. I parked as close to the building as possible, jumped out, and circled my rig with my flashlight. That's when I saw them. Scratches. Deep, jagged gouges running down the back doors of my trailer like something had been clawing at it. They hadn't been there when I left Amarillo. The lock was still intact. My knees went weak. Inside the truck stop, the cashier gave me a weird look and said I looked pale. I muttered something about lack of sleep and poured another coffee. But when I came back out 20 minutes later, the scratches on my trailer had multiplied. Fresh ones, and there were prints in the dirt near the tires. Long, narrow prints with claw marks at the tips. The prints didn't lead away. They just stopped. I didn't sleep that night. I drove straight through to Salt Lake City, eyes gritty, heart pounding with every mile. I kept my lights blazing, the radio on full volume. Sometimes, in the edge of the darkness, I thought I saw a shape keeping pace with me along the shoulder. Sometimes I'd hear that tapping on the back wall of my cab again, faint but steady. Tap, tap, tap. When I finally got to my drop-off point, the warehouse manager took one look at my trailer doors and asked, "What the hell happened here?" I didn't have an answer. I just handed him the paperwork and walked off, feeling like my insides were made of ice. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, it hasn't stopped. No matter what route I take, no matter what time of day, I see it. In my mirrors, standing by the edge of the road, long arms, bent head, just watching. Sometimes I wake up in my sleeper and swear I feel a hand pressed against the outside of the cab. My cameras never catch anything. My phone dies every time I try to take a picture. I've been a trucker for a long time. I've seen my share of weird things, accidents, drunks, even bodies on the shoulder once or twice. But nothing like this. Nothing that follows. Nothing that scratches at the door like it's trying to get in. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's real. But I know it's out there, waiting for the next stretch of empty highway, the next lonely night. And I know it's still following me. Story the end. It was a Thursday night when Joe pulled out of the Memphis freight yard hauling a load of frozen meat bound for Atlanta. The roads were empty, the highway lit only by his headlights and the faint glow of distant cities. Joe had been driving long enough to know the nights could play tricks on your mind, especially on stretches of highway that seemed to go on forever. Still, there was something about this night that felt off. The first sign came about 2 hours out of Memphis, near the outskirts of Little Rock. A figure appeared on the side of the road, a man, or at least a human-shaped silhouette. Joe slowed instinctively, scanning the roadside. The figure stood unnaturally still, shoulders stiff, head tilted slightly as if watching. Joe's instincts told him to keep moving, so he gave the figure a wide berth and pressed the accelerator. That's when he saw it. A set of tire tracks on the shoulder, dark and fresh, leading from the figure straight onto the asphalt. But there was no vehicle, no skid marks, nothing that could have made them. Joe's stomach tightened. He told himself it was his imagination, the fatigue messing with him, but the hair on his neck was standing on end. By midnight, he was deep into Arkansas. The highway was empty, quiet except for the soft hum of his engine. Then he saw the truck. It was parked in the right lane, facing him. Headlights off, blacked out windows. The cab looked decades old, rusted and scarred with peeling paint. At first, Joe thought someone had abandoned it, but there was something wrong. The truck seemed almost wrong. The shadows around it clung unnaturally, the air near it still and heavy. Joe tried to swerve around, but the truck seemed to slide into his path, gliding like a shadow. He braked hard, heart hammering, and as he passed, he caught a glimpse of something in the blacked-out windows. A face, pale, gaunt, pressed flat against the glass, eyes hollow and unblinking. Fear gripped him like ice. Joe floored the accelerator, the hum of his rig drowning out the sound of his own breathing. For the next 30 minutes, he couldn't shake it. Every time he glanced in the mirrors, the blacked-out truck was there, riding silently beside him, perfectly matching his speed, never moving erratically, never blinking. He tried calling out on the CB, but all he got was static, the occasional distorted whisper that sounded like his name. Joe, Joe. It crawled under his skin. He switched channels, begged for anyone to respond, but the silence remained. Only the hum of the engine and the truck beside him keeping pace. Around 3 a.m., somewhere near Little Rock, Joe's fatigue caught up with him. His eyelids drooped, muscles heavy, mind foggy. He forced himself to stay awake, gripping the wheel as tightly as possible, but every time he blinked, he thought he saw movement in the mirrors. The blacked-out cab was closer now, just a few feet behind him, though when he turned fully, there was nothing there. He pulled into a rest stop, shaking, heart racing, and ran inside to use the restroom. When he returned, the parking lot was empty. No other trucks. But on the asphalt, tire marks, wide, deep, and impossibly fresh, curved toward the highway and disappeared. Joe's stomach sank. He knew what they were, and he didn't want to. He spent the rest of the night parked in the rest area, lights on, doors locked. Every shadow outside made him jump. Every gust of wind sounded like a whisper. When morning finally came, he didn't wait. He got back on the road, refusing to stop until he reached Atlanta. Even in daylight, the feeling didn't leave him. On the open stretches of highway, he sometimes thought he saw the blacked-out truck at the far edge of the horizon, vanishing when he blinked. At truck stops, he'd notice tire marks he didn't make, or hear faint tapping at the trailer, like fingernails scraping against metal. Weeks later, Joe was back on the road, but he avoided driving at night entirely. Yet the nightmares followed him. In dreams, he was on the highway, the blacked-out truck sliding silently alongside, whispering his name. Sometimes he'd wake to see tire tracks outside his own driveway, though no vehicle had been there. No one believed him. Other drivers laughed, called it stress, fatigue, hallucinations. Joe didn't care. He knew what he had seen. He knew it was real, and every night he felt it, patient, silent, waiting. Somewhere out there, on a long stretch of empty highway, the blacked-out truck moved without sound, always looking for the next driver foolish enough to be alone after dark. Joe never drove at night again, but the memory never left. The hollow face, the scraping metal, the endless pursuit. And he knew, deep down, that if he ever drove alone at night again, the blacked-out cab would find him, patient, silent, and unstoppable. Story the end. It was a little after 2 a.m. when I left a truck stop outside Barstow, California, heading east through the Mojave Desert. I had a full trailer of dry goods bound for Phoenix, and I was already running behind after a delay at the way station. The night was dry and hot even at hour, the kind of heat that makes the inside of your cab smell like hot metal and old coffee. The highway stretched flat and endless ahead of me, lit only by my high beams and the occasional green sign flickering by. I'd been driving for nearly 19 hours with only short breaks. I'd done worse before, but that night something in me felt frayed. There's a point when exhaustion doesn't just make you tired, it makes the world around you start to feel off. The shadows along the desert road seemed longer than usual, twisting into shapes that disappeared when I blinked. The CB radio had been silent for hours. Nothing but faint static. I was truly alone out there. The first thing that rattled me was the gas station. It was one of those isolated stations you only see out in the desert. A single pump, a flickering neon sign, and a squat little building with barred windows. I wasn't even sure it was open, but I needed fuel and a bathroom break. When I stepped out of my rig, the silence hit me hard. No insects, no wind, just dead stillness, like the desert was holding its breath. Inside, the station was dimly lit and the shelves were mostly empty. Cans of food with labels peeling off, a couple of dusty candy bars. The clerk was a woman, middle-aged, with stringy black hair and a blank expression. She didn't greet me, didn't even look at me, just stared at the counter like she was waiting for something. I tried to break the ice. "Slow night?" I asked. She didn't answer. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. That's when I caught my reflection in the glass of the refrigerator door. Only it wasn't just me. Over my shoulder, in the reflection, stood a tall man in a dark coat and a hat pulled low over his eyes. My heart leapt. I spun around. No one there. Just empty air. I didn't buy anything. I didn't even fuel up. I went straight back to my truck, locked the doors, and started driving again, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But the further I went, the stranger things became. The desert seemed endless, like I wasn't actually moving forward at all. The mile markers started repeating. Mile 112, mile 112 again, then mile 113, then 112 again. My GPS kept recalculating even though there was only one road. The radio crackled and I thought I heard a voice whisper, "Don't stop." I turned it off. Then I saw the headlights behind me. A big rig, no trailer, moving fast. Its lights were old, dim, yellowed, like something out of the 1970s. I eased over to let it pass. It didn't. It stayed right on my bumper, no honks, no signals, just following. I sped up. It sped up. I slowed down. It slowed down. The desert was empty for miles, no exits, no towns, nothing but sand and scrub, and that truck stayed glued to me like a shadow. Finally, I saw an exit sign, just a small one, no text, just an arrow. Desperate, I took it. The road was cracked and narrow, leading towards some kind of old industrial site, maybe an abandoned mine. The other truck followed without hesitation. The road dead-ended at a chain-link fence with a faded sign that said, U.S. government property, no trespassing. I had nowhere else to go. I put the rig in park and grabbed my flashlight. When I stepped out, the desert air hit me like a wall. Still hot, still silent. The other truck was parked 100 feet behind me, engine idling, lights off now. No driver visible. I shone my flashlight at the cab. Empty, completely empty. Then came the sound. Tap, tap, tap from inside my own cab. I swung the flashlight toward my truck. Nothing. The taps grew louder. Tap, tap, tap from the passenger side door. My stomach dropped. I climbed back into the cab, heart hammering. My radio flickered back on by itself. A voice came through, low and guttural. "You shouldn't have left the station." My headlights went out. The cab went dark. Only the dashboard lights flickered weakly. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the passenger seat. A man sitting there, tall, wearing a dark coat and hat. His face was wrong. It shifted like smoke, features melting and reforming. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. He turned his head slowly toward me. His eyes were just black pits. Then I heard the engine of the other truck revving. The ground vibrated under me. My mirrors showed it rolling forward without headlights, without a driver, heading straight for my rig. The man in the passenger seat opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Just darkness, like a void. I slammed the gear shift and floored it, ripping through the chain link fence and back onto the desert road. I didn't care if I shredded the tires. I just drove. The other truck followed for miles, but every time I looked in the mirror, it was further back, fading into the dark. Finally, after what felt like hours, it was gone. The desert looked normal again. The mile markers made sense. My GPS worked. I made it to Phoenix by dawn. The receiver said I looked pale as a corpse. I didn't tell him what happened. I didn't tell anyone for weeks. But I haven't driven that route since. Still, some nights when I'm out on the road and the desert stretches endless and empty, I see yellowed headlights in my mirror. I hear a faint tapping on my passenger door. And I keep driving because I know if I ever stop, it won't just be the road waiting for me. Story the end.